heard just-in-time called the Industrial Revolution. With your experience in productivity improvements here at New Ulm, how would you describe just-in-time in your terms?
Well, Jim, a lot of people think just-in-time is an inventory reduction program. Just-in-time is really the relentless pursuit of waste. And waste is defined as anything that does not add to the value of the product. As an example, excess space is waste. Productivity losses are waste. Inventory and rework is waste. We had an opportunity to see the just-in-time concepts in action during our trip to Japan. We came back with some pretty high expectations.
What were those expectations?
In the area of space, we were looking at reductions of 40% through compression, productivity improvements in the area of 20 to 30%, in-process inventory reductions in the area of 90%.
Were you able to do, Glenn, what effect does this new process have on your Right to First Time program and your push to do products right the first time?
Well, first of all, our Right the First Time program helped lay the foundation for the just-in-time program. We couldn't have been successful without a good foundation. Conversely, the just-in-time program has helped us uncover problems that we didn't know were in the process and has helped improve our Right the First Time program.
Do you think it's possible to implement the just-in-time techniques without doing Right the First Time first?
Short answer, definitely not. We would not have been successful without the good foundation that we laid on Right the First Time. The work that we did with our vendors to improve their quality from 12% discrepant lots down to 2%, we just could not have implemented the just-in-time program without that foundation.
How do you see these changing affecting the way you manage the plant?
A lot more emphasis on focus factory and on compressing the space. Certainly, we don't want to cover up problems with inventories. We want to solve them as they occur and not avoid them.
Good. Glenn, after learning more about the just-in-time techniques, do you believe that they can be applied throughout American industry?
Yes. These techniques aren't based on any cultural traits. They're really a new approach to problem solving. We've got to work closer with our vendors and our customers to provide a smooth supply and a reliable demand.
How do these new production techniques affect the way American managers will solve problems in the future?
Well, in the past, too many managers have assumed that the answer to every problem was more space, more people, more inventory, more equipment. Future managers are going to have to look deeper to identify the real cause of the problem, the underlying cause of the problem, and then work on things like process flow, setup time, excess handling. It's going to require a lot more attention. I think I can show you some of these things in action when we tour the 475 with Glenn Setterholm.
Good.
Jim, this is the Model 275, and it's a typical example of what our lines look like before we do the just-in-time program.
Okay.
What you'll see here is a large area of space with a lot of work-in-process inventory.
Yeah, sure is.
Raw material as well as sub-assemblies built up, as you can see coming down the conveyor. As you can see, the main conveyor line is straight and covers a lot of ground. Some key improvables that we have here to work on are, number one, space reduction. And how we accomplish that is by removing the amount of space between workstations and removing the space that the excess material on the line takes up. The second area is the reducing the work in process itself and the dollar savings associated with eliminating that from your manufacturing process. And thirdly, the productivity improvement that's there by reducing the amount of walk, reach, and move time for the operators. One additional thing you should look at here is this cart full of skid boards that the machines are built on. And you'll see how we handle those on the new just-in-time line.
Good.
Now let's go over and see how we take care of some of these problems on the new line.
Okay.
Jim, this is the new Model 475 assembly line, and it all begins here as we take this pallet from the return conveyor line and move it on to the main line. As you can see, the assembly line arrangement is serpentine, as we call it, and that supports the focused warehouse arrangement and the workstation design. Through workstation design and reduced work in process, we have reduced the amount of space required from 3,700 square feet to 1,800 square feet. In the area of reduced work in process, we have obtained 83% reductions. As far as productivity improvements go, we have an initial 20% improvement in productivity through more efficient workstation layouts. We expect another 10% improvement in productivity by addressing the rocks that are exposed as you reduce work in process. A rock can be any problem that causes a bottleneck on the line.
Ralph, how did you feel about these proposed changes when you first heard about them?
With the vastness of the program, I didn't think we would get total support or commitment by all the other departments in the plant.
I see. How do you feel about the way things are going now?
Right now, I feel quite positive about them. We have accomplished most of our goals. We've got a few minor things, but I think we've accomplished what we were after.
Ralph, what was the single biggest change that occurred during this process?
I guess the response to the bottlenecks and the problems on the line by my adjuster and by my supporting group.
Well, basically, Jim, with the high expectations that were laid out for us on this program, we were forced to come up with solutions to the problems or opportunities that we saw out there. And that caused us to really come up with some innovative things. We did this by talking to the assembly line workers and getting their input into the workstations and what they felt we could do better. We also set up a prototype assembly line where we would develop the key concepts that we were after, the design ideals, if you want to call it that. And basically these design ideals were basically eliminating or reducing unnecessary walk, reach, and move times on the part of the operators. In addition to that, we would look at reducing the work in process on the line, eliminating or reducing setups, and things like that.
Good. What type of effort and commitment is required by those people outside the project team?
Jim, basically I feel you need strong, visible commitment from upper management, both in the plant and in the division. As far as in the plant goes, we need the plant manager commitment as well as the department heads. It's our feeling that early involvement by key departmental personnel is important to the success of the program. That early involvement gives them a feeling of ownership when we do start implementation.
From an engineer's perspective, what are the benefits derived from the just-in-time project?
Basically, the idea that problems can no longer hide under rework, scrap, and piles of inventory. We work under the philosophy of eliminating problems once and for all times. This is basically the cornerstone of our right the first time way of life at 3M. One big plus with this is that it allows our engineers more time to go out and work on parts cost reduction.
Confidence we've gained, we're going to expand this to other areas in the plant, just like electronic assembly.
Wayne, what's been the effect here in EA?
Well, we've seen three major benefits. The first is that we've reduced our lead time from 30 days down to 7. And compatible with that, we've seen a reduction in the work-in-process inventory. Since the program started, we've reduced the work-in-process inventory by over $1 million. And also, and probably most importantly, we've seen an increase of 28% in our productivity.
Super. How did you attain these results?
Well, the first thing we did was to gain the confidence of the people in the program by phasing it in. We also had to modify our material control system to take into account the smaller lot sizes and shorter lead times. And thirdly, we had to re-engineer the production floor to give the people the tools and the methods to implement just in time. The offline material kitting procedure has been improved significantly. The parts in the focused warehouse are kitted directly into the cubby containers. These containers go to the production line and become part of the workstation. This minimizes material handling and improves service labor productivity.
Our quality program really helped us build a good partnership with our vendors, and the Just-in-Time project is really just an extension of that relationship. So I think it's had a very positive effect on our vendor community. Basically, it helps them determine where they can accomplish savings in their operations, similar to what we're doing here.
How willing have the vendors been to go along with the changes that are necessary?
I think extremely willing. I guess standing right here, where one of the examples is been very cooperative and help us package the parts. I think the most important thing is to show our vendors how this is going to help them improve their operation.
What benefits have you gained compared to what you expected?
We established a motto when we started this program, and it was aim high to achieve high. And we did aim high, but we did achieve high. We achieved most of our expectations. Space, 50% reduction, productivity increases in the range of 20 to 30%. And I might add, in both of these cases, we have been able to double the volume. In-process inventory reductions of 90%. We did quite well, I think.
Good. What weaknesses or problems do you see in applying the just-in-time techniques?
I think the major weakness, and it's probably not a weakness, but it does take a lot of time and effort to relay out your plant and accomplish the savings. I guess if we were smart enough at the time, we would have liked to have done it right the first time when we set up the lines 7 or 8 years ago. We're sure going to do it in the future, though.
What long-range plans do you have for just-in-time techniques in your plant?
Well, we're going to expand the just-in-time concept to the rest of the plant. The pilot program has been very successful, and we feel we can have the same kind of success throughout the plant.
What long-term benefits do you see on a division-wide basis?
Oh, first of all, I think that in both hard goods and soft goods, we can achieve the same kind of results. I see us improving our return on capital employed because we're not going to be spending money on bricks and mortar and equipment to improve our productivity. I think these benefits can be applied across all of 3M, really across all of industry.
I'd like to start out with a little quiz here. How many of you had a good time last night? Can I see a show of hands? Ah, that is super. How many of you think you had a good time but can't quite remember? Ah, good, I know. You may have had Shell's beer. We have our own brewery in town. It's called Shell's, in case you don't know. And we take a survey every time we get a bunch of out-of-towners coming in. And we really are able to pinpoint the people that drink Shell's beer. And they're, for the most part, a very religious people. You see them the next morning, they're going, oh my God. They're praying all the time. I know I speak for all of the employees in the plant when I say that we're really pleased to host this Quality Circle Conference. In talking to us, and being with us, you probably become aware that we're very proud of our plant and our community. And we look forward to sharing both of those with you during this conference. I understand that some of you went to one of our restaurants last night, the Kaiserhof, and I would guess that you had a fine meal. And there are other good places in New Ulm also. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce our committee and publicly thank them for their extra effort. Could you, when I call your name, could you please stand up? And Gene Hoff, first of all. Gene was in charge. Diane Fisher. Diane here. There we go. Deanna Pa. Jen is the one who will yell and scream if we do something wrong. She's in charge of that part of the conference. John Zuffer. John. And Elva Buck. Let's give them a big hand for all the work they've done. Thank you. As I prepared these remarks, I was reminded of Winston Churchill's advice to a young member, new member of the House of Lords. And he gave him 3 principles to live by. And the first was, never try to climb a wall that's leaning towards you. And the second was, never try to kiss a woman that's leaning away from you. And finally, never speak to an audience that knows more about the subject matter than you do. With this in mind, I'd like to share a few thoughts about quality circles. Now, these thoughts are based on my personal experiences and might be a little bit biased. I began my working career about 36 years ago in the U.S. Steel plant at Duluth, Minnesota. And like most new employees, I was eager to learn my job and to make a contribution. I soon found out that U.S. Steel had one way of doing things, their way. Their only contribution to employee involvement was the annual picnic. They felt that employees should be seen and not heard. I can vividly remember coming up with an idea to reduce the cost of a part. It was a shaft with a gear on it, and it required a lot of close tolerance machining. And we used several parts of this particular type every month. So I went and checked where the parts were being used, and I seen that the gear on the part that I was making should have meshed with something else, but the gear that it should have meshed with had been eliminated several years ago. And it became quickly apparent that we could really reduce the cost of that part just by getting rid of the machining of that gear. So I went to the supervisor, and I was all excited, and I explained the idea to him. And he got a real puzzled look on his face, and he said, Bloomer, our job is to make the parts. We're not supposed to design the parts. And right away I got the idea that suggestions or ideas aren't going to be very popular in U.S. Steel. The supervisors were well equipped with a list of standard reasons why things wouldn't work. And to this day and age, maybe in 3M, you've still heard from time to time a few of these ideas. Like, we tried that a few years ago. It's a good idea, but top management would never buy it. The union rules won't allow us to try it. This place is not ready for an idea like that. At that same time, the Japanese were shipping nails into Duluth and into the U.S. also at a selling price that was much lower than our manufacturing costs. Now, they had a lot of quality problems. The nails bent, and there was other quality problems. We didn't know it at the time, but they were developing a manufacturing philosophy that would have a devastating impact on U.S. Steel. After 12 years at the steel plant, I could see the handwriting on the wall and decided to leave. And within 5 years, that steel mill closed. If you go up to Duluth right now, and it's a big empty field where that steel mill used to stand, where 2,500 people used to work. When I started to work for 3M, it became quickly apparent that we were light years ahead of the steel companies. But we still had a long way to go. Now, about this time, you might be asking yourself, what in the hell does this have to do with quality circles? And I'd submit to you that it has everything to do with quality circles. In my lifetime, I've seen industry gradually change their expectations of the American worker. They used to hire just a pair of hands. Now they're hiring and hopefully utilizing the entire body, the most important part of which is the human mind. Most industries are recognizing the contribution employees can make toward improving the business. They recognize that their greatest contribution might be their innovation and their ideas. Now, unfortunately, there are companies and managers that don't recognize the value of this contribution. On the positive side, 3M is a company that really believes in employee involvement and listening to their employees. Now, this is not to say, and you know this better than I do, that every 3M manager and supervisor is willing to listen to employee ideas. In the New Ulm plant, most of our managers and supervisors value their employee opinions. But there are a few who feel threatened by a new idea. The same is true of our Quality Circle program. Some supervisors have taken to this concept like a duck to water. But a few of them are struggling and feel like they're drowning in a sea of ideas. So what's the point of all this? The point is that we've come a long way, but we've got a long way to go. Who would have believed 5 years ago that 3M would have a regional quality conference in New Ulm, Minnesota? I wonder how many of you even knew where New Ulm, Minnesota was 5 years ago. Who would have believed that this conference would be attended by hourly and salaried, union and non-union personnel? Who would have believed that this conference would be scheduled in a time of real economic hardship? In case you don't know it, our company's got some problems right now. We're struggling a little bit. If you don't believe it, look at that stock price. So we've got a few problems. None that we can't solve, but we've got some problems. Who would have believed that this conference would be scheduled when other conferences, sales conferences, whatever, are being canceled because of the profitability pressures? I hope this is one way of demonstrating 3M's commitment to the Quality Circle concept, because we are committed to the concept. As I mentioned earlier, we've come a long way. I'd like to share just one example. I see Cal here. I'm sure he can relate to this example. That would help illustrate our progress. Just one small example. When I started with 3M, it was difficult for anyone to get manufacturing cost data. 3M kept that data close to their vest. Difficult to find out if we were making a profit or not. They kept that close to their desk. Most of the accountants felt that unit costs should not be shared with the people in manufacturing. We find out how much we were making it for, we could be a real threat. Today, it's commonplace for all levels of manufacturing to have cost data. It's quite common for quality circles to have access to cost statements so they can prioritize their efforts. If you're in a quality circle and you don't get that data, I'd suggest that you ask for it. Our quality circles, a lot of them have done pie charts and zeroed in on the part of the pie that they want to go after. So if you're not doing that, I would suggest that you do it. If time permitted, I could give you several more examples of these changes. As a plant manager, I recognize the importance of soliciting and implementing our employee ideas. I know that we will not be successful or profitable if we fail to do this. I personally am committed to quality circles and employee involvement. I know that it's not enough to say you are committed, you must demonstrate you're committed. Now, a lot of you had ham and eggs or bacon and eggs for breakfast, I'm sure. Now, that hen cackled and said she was committed, but believe me, that old pig really demonstrated his commitment. Managers must give a piece of their hide to demonstrate their commitment. We must set the example for our employees and their supervisors. We must create an environment where every employee's ideas are given a chance to grow and succeed. We must find ways to give our quality circles the recognition they deserve. We must make sure that supervisors understand that quality circles cannot be measured. You cannot measure their total commitment by just looking at the projects that they work on. There's a lot of other benefits. Quality circle members who's properly trained and motivated will contribute every day of the week, not just during the meetings. A few weeks ago, we had a quality circle leaders meeting in this Holiday Inn, and we gave them an anonymous questionnaire. And one of the questions we asked was, has your quality circle training helped you become a better employee? The response was 100% favorable. You don't take many anonymous questionnaires in this company and get 100% favorable, but it was 100% favorable. In spite of all the problems and all the frustrations, our employees felt their experiences helped them on the job. To me, that's what quality circles are all about. As we began this Quality Circle Conference, it's important that we look back and recognize the progress we have made. I would hope, though, that we spend most of our time looking ahead and recognizing the progress that we can make.
Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
And saves millions of dollars in the process.
It makes good business sense. We all live on spaceship Earth here. Whatever I do affects you, what you do affects me. Same way in manufacturing.
Made without solvents. Each year, the factory pours 15 million pounds of the toxics into the air. So instead of removing solvents, plant manager Glenn Bloomer decided to recycle them.
Anxious to see this baby take off and go work.
We are installing a solvent recovery system. Rather than wasting that money up the smokestack, we're now recycling those solvents and reusing them.
The recovery system will reduce the plant's toxic emissions by 80% and pay for itself in 4 years.
It's costing us more, but you got to remember, we're reusing it, and that's going to give us a good return on our investment.
Employees at all levels are involved in 3P projects. Carolyn Walski works on the videotape assembly line, checking the quality of plastic cassettes. Faulty parts used to be thrown out. Now, they're recycled.
Through the years, we would see this stuff being going into the landfills and stuff and wonder, you know, why couldn't something be done about it? And we didn't realize at the time that we could do something about it. So once we organized our team and knew that we could, well, we went ahead with it.
The plant used to pay $800 a month to dump the plastic. Now it's shipped to the Resource Recovery Division to create revenue for 3M.
We found an outlet for it where we're selling it for $1,200 a month. That material is reprocessed, pelletized, and reformed into flower pots and other plastic types of products like that.